Hey guys, this is Miss Harlequin, and in this video I'm going to model how I would deal with some multiple choice questions with a sample test passage called Spies and Petticoats. Now this passage actually comes from our Ready New York test booklet on page 37, in case you'd like to follow along. Alright, so we're going to start with our first read, Spies and Petticoats by Lisa Torrey. During the Civil War, thousands of women served as nurses. They lived in hospitals and on the front lines for the Union and the Confederacy. These angels of the battlefields hold a well-known place in American history. Less known, however, is the fact that hundreds of women also served in a far different capacity. They risked their lives as undercover spies. These women spies came from a variety of backgrounds, from former slaves to fashionable socialites. Yet these very different women shared some valuable traits. Each had detailed knowledge of daily activities and troop movements in the part of the country where she lived. This knowledge made the women very helpful to military leaders, both Union and Confederate. These women also shared a passion for either the Union or the Confederacy, and they were willing to die for it. Across the country, these female spies worked within carefully constructed networks, gathering information and using various means to relay messages. One of the Union's top female spies was a Southern woman named Elizabeth Van Lew. Even though Van Lew lived in the South, she was strongly against slavery. She convinced her own family to free the slaves. She was wealthy and well educated, and she lived in Richmond, Virginia, the capital of the Confederacy. When a Union general asked Van Lew to work as a spy, she readily agreed. Elizabeth Van Lew enlisted the help of other Union supporters in Richmond to become her couriers. These couriers delivered secret information from her to General Grant, who led the Union troops. She also set up relay stations for the couriers at secret meeting points between Richmond and Grant's headquarters. Van Lew wrote her coded messages in invisible ink, and the messages were often hidden inside hollowed-out vegetables from Van Lew's garden. Because of Van Lew's efforts, General Grant learned how the Confederate Army was defending Richmond. When General Grant and his Union troops captured Richmond, Elizabeth Van Lew proudly flew the Union flag from the roof of her house. General Grant even visited her at her home. He wanted to thank Van Lew in person for her service to the Union. The former slave Harriet Tubman is celebrated for her work as a conductor of the Underground Railroad. She led hundreds of slaves to freedom in the North. And she was also one of the Union's most valuable spies. Because of her work with the Underground Railroad, Tubman knew firsthand all of the land and waterway transportation routes throughout the South. With this knowledge, she was able to map territory behind enemy lines for the Union. Also, because of her work with the Underground Railroad, Tubman had the great respect of many people, especially slaves and former slaves. She enlisted the help of these loyal people as scouts when she set up a vast spy ring for the Union. Led and trained by Tubman, her scouts went on dangerous missions behind enemy lines. Harriet Tubman herself led successful raids along the South Carolina coast in Confederate territory. These raids disturbed supply lines vital to the Confederate Army, and they freed hundreds of slaves. While Elizabeth Van Lew, Harriet Tubman, and many other women worked as spies for the Union, other women were actively spying for the Confederacy. One woman in particular was the Confederacy's master spy. Her name was Rose O'Neal Greenhow. Greenhow was a wealthy widow. She was also a charming hostess. She often invited military and political leaders to her home for social evenings. And she lived in the ideal place for secretly obtaining information about the Union, Washington, D.C. Not only was Washington, D.C. the capital of the United States, it was the headquarters of the Union Army during the Civil War. Rose Greenhow considered herself a Southerner through and through. She would do anything to help the Confederacy win the Civil War. Operating from the Union capital, Greenhow soon organized the war's largest network of Confederate spies. Writing in secret code, she sent her reports by courier. Each courier passed Greenhow's reports to the next courier in a relay system known as the secret line. Rose Greenhow's messages were highly detailed. They described Union troop movements and strategies or plans of action. One of these messages gave urgent information about the Union Army's plan of attack at the First Battle of Bull Run. Greenhouse's accurate information led to a victory for the Confederate Army. In 1861, Rose was placed under house arrest by the newly formed Secret Service. Even then, the master spy managed to find out Union secrets and send them to Confederate military leaders. After Rose was released from house arrest, she tried to smuggle gold for the Confederate treasury. However, the boat she was in turned over in rough water. Rose drowned, weighed down by the heavy gold. Okay, so now we're going to look at the multiple choice questions. And remember that my two favorite strategies are predicting answer choices, so covering up the answer choices and just trying to answer it based on my knowledge of the passage, looking at text evidence. And then when that's not possible or when it fails, I love to use process of elimination, where I really just read through the answer choices, eliminate what's wrong, and I use logical reasoning to pick the best peanut butter cup answer choice. According to the passage, women worked as spies during the Civil War. All right, so from the way this question is phrased, I can tell that this is an incomplete sentence, and it seems like the answer choices are going to actually complete it. And the beginning part is very vague, so I actually don't think that the predicting strategy is going to work for this one. What I really need to do is uncover and read each of the answer choices as the ending of this sentence and choose the one that makes the most sense based on what the article was mostly about. All right, so women who worked as spies during the Civil War were all from small towns. That's not true. The last one I just read about was from D.C., so this contradicts information from the passage. They came from a variety of backgrounds. That is true. They talked about a former slave, Harriet Tubman. They also talked about a wealthy woman. They were paid very well for their service. No, that's not true. It contradicts the passage. They were never paid. They had previous spy experience. No, again, that's not true from the text. Harriet Tubman was a slave. She wasn't a spy. So even just using her as an example means this can't possibly be the answer. So this has to be B. All right, so again, what I really just did is I just looked through all the answer choices. I thought about what I knew from the passage, and I used text evidence. All of the answer choices that were incorrect, there was no text evidence to support it. All right, 41. Read this sentence about Elizabeth Van Loo from paragraph 3 of the passage. She convinced her own family to free their slaves. Why does the author include this sentence in the paragraph? All right, well, whenever they ask you a question like this, you really just have to think about what are you learning about the topic from that specific sentence. What am I learning about Elizabeth Van Loo from the sentence that she convinced her own family to free their slaves? Well, if she convinced her own family to free their slaves, what does that show me about her? It shows me that she really feels very strongly about slaves having freedom. Because if she didn't, she wouldn't try to convince her family to free their slaves. If she just was against slavery but didn't care that much, then she really probably wouldn't do anything about it. Okay. Does it introduce how strongly Van Loo felt against slavery? Yeah, I mean, that is what I just kind of predicted. Does it describe her feelings toward her family? No, this is about slavery. To explain how Van Loo worked undercover with former slaves. This is not about working undercover. It's just telling me that she wanted her family to free their slaves. To review what originally made Van Loo support the Union. Well, this doesn't give me a reason for why she supported the Union. It just shows me that she is against slavery more than, and the fact that she's against slavery is the reason she supported the Union. This is a distractor answer. This, A, is really what I'm learning from that line, and it matches what I predicted. 42. Which statement best reflects the central idea of the passage? All right, so clearly I cannot use the prediction strategy for this. This is like a best evidence question. I know that when I'm looking for central idea, I'm looking for who and what this article was mostly about. I don't want it to be too specific, and I don't want it to be too general. Thousands of women volunteered as nurses and spies, serving either the Union or the Confederacy during the Civil War. Tempting. I'm not sure. One of the most famous female spies for the Union was a Southern woman named Elizabeth Van Loo. Okay, that's one section. That's a detail. It can't be the central idea. Women were especially successful as spies during the Civil War because no one suspected them of betraying either the Union or the Confederacy. Well, if I chose this as the central idea, is it too general? I think that this actually is kind of what this article is about. However, this sentence is really focusing on why the women were successful and that no one suspected them of betraying. Well, actually, that can't be the central idea because the last spy, she was suspected. She was placed on house arrest. So I have to eliminate this. This doesn't match what the passage, a detail from the passage. All right, last one. During the Civil War, many women worked as undercover spies, gathering secret information to help either the Union or the Confederacy. Yeah, this seems like the central idea. This whole article gave me 3 examples of women who were both from either side of the war working as spies. So when I go back to A, am I sure I want to eliminate that? Thousands of women volunteered as nurses and spies. Okay. This seems like this is a detail. And the fact that it's talking about volunteering as nurses tells me this is not really the central idea. Because even though they might have mentioned that in the intro paragraph, this whole article is focusing on spies, not nurses. So why would I even mention nurses in a central idea sentence? It really wouldn't make any sense. All right, so as you can see, it takes a lot of thought to go through a central idea question. You don't want to rush. You really want to think about what you read and what the overall article was trying to teach you about that topic. All right, question 43. Read these sentences from paragraph 4 of the passage. Elizabeth Van Loo engaged the help of other Union supporters in Richmond to become her couriers. These couriers delivered secret information from her to General Grant, who led the Union troops. Which is the best meaning of the word couriers as it is used here? All right, so this is a context clue question. If I take the word couriers and I delete it out, what would I replace it with? These blanks delivered secret information. Well, who's going to deliver secret information? It's going to be some kind of messenger of some kind. That's got to be the answer. That has to be what couriers mean. Are they drivers? Well, driver doesn't necessarily mean that you're delivering a message. An inspector, inspecting has nothing to do with taking messages. Here we have the answer I predicted. Guides. They're not guiding anything. They're delivering a message. Our final question. Which of these details should be left out of a summary of the passage? Okay, I can't predict. Again, I have to look through all the answer choices. So I know that in a summary, you're definitely going to have the central idea, and then the details should be specific details that prove that that central idea is true. So if I go back to my central idea sentence, during the Civil War, many women worked as undercover spies for either the Union or the Confederacy. I need the best detail to support that. Many women risked their lives working as spies during the Civil War. All right, this could be a detail. Women spies had a passion for one side or the other and were willing to die for it. Okay, that's good. Confederate spy Rose O'Neal Greenhow was a wealthy widow. Is that important, though? To prove that there were spies working to help the Union or the Confederacy. Does it matter that she was a wealthy widow? This seems like an irrelevant detail that I probably wouldn't include in my summary. So this looks like it could be the answer choice, because I'm looking for something to leave out. Harriet Tubman was used many former slaves as scouts in her spy ring for the Union. See, this seems good too. I think I would use that detail. It's important. So I'm going to go with C. Just the fact that she was a wealthy widow really doesn't help me learn anything about how they spied, why they spied. It doesn't seem that important. Okay. And so I hope this video made you a little bit more confident and showed you once again how you can use some of our test taking and close reading strategies for multiple choice questions.